The schoolyard was buzzing with laughter, but not the kind that brings joy. A group of local bullies had cornered Emma Johnson, the quiet farm girl known for her shy nature and simple clothes. She was used to blending into the background, too timid to speak up, but that morning everything changed. What the bullies didn't know was that Emma had a twin sister, Hannah. And Hannah was no ordinary sister. She was a Delta Force operator, a legend in the military world, trained to face dangers these bullies couldn't even imagine. It all began when Emma was humiliated in front of her classmates. The bullies shoved her into the mud, mocking her family's farm and calling her weak. Her books scattered, her pride shattered, Emma fought back tears. She hated conflict and always tried to stay invisible. But this time, their cruelty cut deeper than usual. That night, Emma sat on the porch, staring at the wide-open fields, and made a call she never thought she'd make. She dialed Hannah. When Hannah answered, her tone was calm but firm. "Emma, tell me what happened." For the first time, Emma poured her heart out, the endless taunts, the laughter, the names that clung to her like scars. Hannah listened in silence. She'd faced war zones, terrorists, and life-or-death missions, but nothing made her blood boil like hearing her twin was being broken down by cowards. "I'm coming home," Hannah said. The next day, Hannah returned to the farm. She looked like Emma, same brown eyes, same smile, but her presence carried a weight that could silence any room. Emma begged her not to cause trouble, but Hannah shook her head. "This isn't just about you. It's about every kid who's too afraid to stand up. We're going to change that." The bullies didn't take long to show their faces again. At the local diner, they spotted Emma sitting at a booth. They swaggered over, ready to repeat yesterday's torment, only this time, it wasn't Emma they cornered. It was Hannah. The bullies smirked, tossing cruel words, but Hannah didn't flinch. She looked them dead in the eye and said, "Say that again." Her voice was steady, calm, but underneath, it carried the weight of someone who had stared down men with guns and lived to tell the tale. One boy tried to shove her shoulder. That was his first mistake. In a flash, Hannah twisted his arm gently but firmly, not enough to injure, but enough to show control. The room went silent. "You think strength is about hurting people weaker than you?" she asked. "Let me tell you what strength really is." She released him, and he stumbled back, wide-eyed. Word spread fast. The bullies were humiliated, not by violence, but by the realization that their cruelty meant nothing against someone who knew real power. But Hannah wasn't done. She didn't just scare them, she challenged them. She invited them to the farm the next morning. At first, they laughed. But curiosity, and bruised pride, brought them there. What they found wasn't what they expected. Hannah had them running drills across the fields, hauling hay bales, doing push-ups in the dirt. She didn't insult them, didn't humiliate them. She pushed them. Every time they wanted to quit, she barked, "You think Emma doesn't feel like quitting every day? And yet she keeps going." That's strength. By noon, the bullies were gasping for breath, drenched in sweat, but for the first time, they were quiet. Emma watched from the porch, tears in her eyes. Her sister wasn't just defending her, she was teaching them all something far bigger. Hannah knew that breaking a bully down with fists only created more hate. But showing them discipline, resilience, and respect, that could plant seeds of change. Over the following weeks, something incredible happened. The bullies stopped tormenting Emma. Slowly, they began to treat others with more respect. They even started helping out around the farm, learning teamwork from Hannah's drills. The small town, once divided by cruelty and fear, began to feel different. Emma found her own strength too. Watching Hannah, she realized she didn't have to stay silent anymore. The next time someone tried to mock her, she stood tall and said, "I'm not weak. You just don't understand what strength really looks like." And no one laughed. By the end, Hannah didn't stay to take credit. She returned to her unit, slipping back into the shadows of her Delta Force life. But her impact stayed behind. Emma was no longer the timid girl hiding in the corner. She was the farm girl who had faced her bullies and found her voice, with a sister's unshakable love as her shield. The story of the Johnson twins spread through the town, a reminder that true power isn't about fear or fists, it's about lifting others up, about standing for what's right, even when your voice trembles. And the bullies. They never forgot the lesson. Because sometimes, life gives you exactly the wrong person to mess with. And in this case, it was the twin of a Delta Force legend. The laughter that echoed through the schoolyard wasn't cheerful. It was sharp, cruel, and aimed directly at Emma Johnson. A quiet farm girl, Emma had never asked for attention. She wore hand-me-down clothes, carried her books in an old backpack, and usually kept her head down. But that morning, the bullies decided she was their entertainment. They mocked her accent, her muddy boots, even the smell of hay that seemed to cling to her. One boy shoved her so hard she stumbled into the dirt. Another kicked her backpack, spilling her notebooks across the ground. Emma bent down to gather her things as the jeers grew louder, burning her ears like fire. For years, Emma endured this quietly. She was shy, gentle, and never wanted to cause trouble. But that day was different. The humiliation was so deep that when she got home, she didn't even greet her parents. She went straight to the porch, staring across the wide fields that stretched endlessly under the orange sunset. She held her phone for a long time, her fingers trembling, before finally making a call she had avoided for too long. "Emma? Is everything okay?" a familiar voice answered. It was Hannah, her twin sister. Emma hesitated. She hadn't wanted to burden Hannah, who was always away, serving in the shadows of the U.S. military. But the pain spilled out of her before she could stop it. She described the names, the shoves, the humiliation. On the other end, there was silence. Hannah had stared down warlords, terrorists, and situations where her life balanced on a knife's edge. But nothing made her angrier than hearing her sister cry. "I'm coming home," Hannah said finally, her voice low and steady. The next morning, the Johnson farm felt alive again. Hannah's truck pulled into the gravel driveway, and Emma ran out, hugging her tightly. They looked almost identical, the same brown eyes, the same determined jawline, but while Emma's eyes carried softness, Hannah's carried a storm. She had the kind of presence that made people stand straighter, even without a word. Emma tried to warn her. "Please, don't cause trouble. I don't want things to get worse." Hannah smiled faintly. "Emma, sometimes trouble is exactly what they need. But I promise you, I won't fight them. I'll teach them." That evening, they went into town together. Emma was nervous, but Hannah walked with quiet confidence. At the diner, the bullies appeared again. They saw Emma and smirked, eager to repeat yesterday's cruelty. They swaggered over, leaning against the booth, tossing cruel words like knives. But this time, it wasn't Emma they were dealing with. It was Hannah. When one boy reached out to shove her shoulder, Hannah caught his wrist with lightning speed. She didn't hurt him, but the sudden control froze him in place. The diner went silent. Her eyes locked on his, calm but deadly serious. "You think strength is about shoving someone weaker than you?" she asked. "Let me show you what real strength is." She released him, and the following day, Hannah invited the bullies to the farm. At first, they laughed at the idea. Why would they waste time on a farm with the girl they mocked? But pride can be a dangerous thing. By noon, they showed up, ready to prove themselves. What they didn't expect was the grueling training Hannah put them through. "Pick up that bale of hay," she ordered. "Run to the fence and back. Again. Faster. Don't stop." They grumbled, cursed, and laughed at first, but soon they were drenched in sweat, gasping for breath. Hannah didn't insult them. She didn't mock them the way they had mocked Emma. Instead, she pushed them to their limits, forcing them to taste exhaustion, to face their own weakness. Every time they wanted to quit, Hannah barked, "Emma feels like quitting every day, but she doesn't. She gets up at dawn, works the fields, takes care of her family. That's strength. What have you done except tear others down?" By the end of the first day, the bullies collapsed in the dirt. For the first time in their lives, they felt small, but not because someone mocked them. Because they realized how weak they truly were inside. Over the next few weeks, the farm became a strange training ground. Hannah kept calling them back, and though they resisted, something kept dragging them there. She taught them discipline, teamwork, and endurance. She didn't just train their bodies, she trained their hearts. Slowly, they began to respect her. Then, something even stranger happened, they began to respect Emma. Emma herself started to change too. Watching her sister stand tall and fearless lit a fire inside her. She realized she didn't have to hide anymore. The next time one of the boys muttered a cruel word under his breath at school, Emma turned to him, looked him in the eye, and said firmly, "Not anymore. I'm done being your joke." To her surprise, he lowered his head and walked away. The town began to notice the change. The bullies stopped tormenting other kids. They even started helping out on the farm, stacking hay, fixing fences, learning responsibility. Parents whispered about the miracle at the Johnson farm. Hannah had turned the cruelest kids in town into something better, not by breaking them down, but by building them up. One evening, after weeks of this transformation, Emma sat with Hannah on the porch again. "You didn't just protect me," she said softly. "You showed me who I could be." Hannah smiled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You were always strong, Emma. You just didn't see it. I only held up the mirror." Soon after, Hannah returned to her unit, called back to the shadows where she belonged. She didn't want recognition or thanks. That wasn't her way. But her lessons remained. Emma walked into school every day with her head high, no longer the timid farm girl who hid in corners. She was the girl who had faced her bullies and found her voice. The bullies. They never forgot the lessons drilled into them on that farm. Years later, some of